Back on NFL Live. Today is June 2nd, which is a big day on the NFL calendar. Why is that, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. Because cutting or trading a player after June 1st allows a team to spread out the dead money salary cap hit over 2 years instead of absorbing it all this year. There were 14 players cut earlier this offseason who were designated as post-June 1st cuts, which meant they could sign with other teams whenever they wanted, but the teams that cut them wouldn't get the cap relief until today. So 9 teams getting fresh cap relief today. As for trades, though, you can't make a trade before June 1st and call it a post-June 1st trade the way you can with cuts. You actually have to wait until after June 1st to make the trade if you want the cap relief. Quiz on that later. But in the meantime, let's take a closer look at some of those guys who could potentially be traded now that June 1st has come and gone. Let's stay in Atlanta where we were before with Kirk Cousins, Jeremy.
Dan, you got me excited about post-June 1st. That was a great breakdown. Kirk Cousins, the Falcons can now save $27.5 million on their cap if they trade him, but the cap is not the issue. It's that money is guaranteed along with $10 million in 2026. No team wants to cover a big portion of that. Atlanta seems to be holding out hope if they're going to trade him that somebody will pay that big money. But as one source told me, if they were willing to take like $7 or $8 million on an offset on that contract, then a trade would have been done months ago. Maybe even the Cleveland Browns before they added 18 quarterbacks to their quarterback room. There's just not a market right now outside of maybe Pittsburgh as a plan B if they don't get Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, Pittsburgh's the only team that really makes sense to me, and it makes sense only under a certain set of conditions. If you could promise me that Kirk Cousins looked more like he did at the end of his tenure in Minnesota as opposed to last year coming off the Achilles, then I would go all in, because that version of Kirk Cousins, the quarterback who could run under center play action, is a good fit for Arthur Smith's offense. But can he do that? Obviously he could not in Atlanta. So you would want to know a bit more about his health if you were Pittsburgh, and I don't know how much they can know in the current circumstances.
You know, Mina, I think he's a much better bet for Pittsburgh than Aaron Rodgers. He's 5 years younger. He actually played better, in my opinion, than Aaron Rodgers did. And one thing you can do under the rules is you can bring a player in for a physical in contemplation of a trade. So if I'm Pittsburgh, I'm trying to get Kirk Cousins in for a physical. And look, Jeremy alluded to it, guys. These are hard deals to get done because not only are you negotiating draft choice compensation, but you also have to come to an agreement on who's paying what in terms of the guaranteed money, and obviously that's going to be a big hurdle to overcome. Cousins
had shoulder and elbow injuries he suffered in Week 10. Wasn't the same after that, so we'll see where that goes as the offseason moves along. Dolphins have been upfront about the idea that Jalen Ramsey won't be on their team this year. What are you hearing on him?
Yeah, Dan, I'm hearing that the Miami Dolphins are still engaged with multiple teams on a trade for Jalen Ramsey. There is some optimism that something could get done. Money here an issue too, $24 million in guarantees, so perhaps they can split the difference with a new team. The LA Rams have been involved. To what extent is still unclear. I haven't sensed that they're getting this over the finish line right now as of yet. So it's been quiet on that front. You know, Seattle's a team that kind of interests me because they've been looking at a lot of the veteran free agent cornerbacks left. They wanted to draft a cornerback in the first 3 rounds, didn't. So that could be an option as well. Somebody's got to step up and cover that money, but this should get done in the coming weeks.
Yeah, Jeremy, like we just talked about with Kirk Cousins, there's 2 negotiations that have to go on with guaranteed money. Draft choice compensation, and then who's paying what. And now that it's been out there publicly, if I'm the Rams or some other team and I want Jalen Ramsey, knowing that Miami's going to eventually trade him, I'm not going to move a lot on the guaranteed money, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons this is going to take a while to get done. And I know we're all in the dot connecting world, but I think going back to the Rams makes a ton of sense. You know, they were the team that probably played Philadelphia the best in the postseason. Adding Jalen Ramsey, who probably has 2 years left at a high level, makes a lot of sense.
Looking at this roster, I was actually a little bit surprised they didn't upgrade at cornerback, because it does stand out to me as the weakness on this depth chart. And if he were to return to the Rams, I'd be interested. They could use him inside, similarly to how they did back when he was on the Super Bowl team playing the star position. He gives them some versatility. He's excellent against the run. He's a terrific tackler. So I feel like that reunion is something we could definitely see happen because it makes football sense.
Staying with the Dolphins, there was some noise earlier this offseason around Tyreek Hill. Is that a guy that could get traded, Jeremy?
Yeah, Dan, I would be mildly surprised. Where Ramsey, you hear a lot about his trade market. You're not hearing a ton about Tyreek Hill. But now that it is in early June, the Dolphins can save about $15 million on their cap if they were to trade him. So it maybe makes it enticing given the problems he had there last year. There would be a market if they looked heavily into this. He's still considered a top 3 wide receiver from most of the teams I talked to, but he's saying all the right things publicly. It seems like he wants to be back in Miami. I expect that they can work something out. So probably Ramsey gone, Hill stays.
Yeah, Jeremy, earlier in the show, we discussed timelines and, why Kyle Pitts being traded seems inconsistent. I'd say the same thing here. A year ago, Miami extended Tua Tagovailoa, and when you think about how explosive this offense is when they're all out there and healthy with, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So I'd be hard-pressed to see, you've invested into, he's obviously your future. They've invested in the offensive line, which I think will be better this year. So trading Tyreek Hill to me just, again, would seem inconsistent.
Yeah, they extended Tua last offseason. They also extended Jalen Ramsey last offseason. We just talked about him being traded. So you never know what's going on down there in Miami. Mina, in a hypothetical world where Tyreek Hill were to be traded, who should be calling the Dolphins?
Yeah, I'm looking at teams that could use a deep threat. Once again, I will mention the Chargers, who I alluded to with Kyle Pitts. I think that's the missing piece on that offense. So that makes sense to me. Elsewhere in their division, the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't see that happening, but there is a need there. Maybe things have softened over time. And then another team we talked about, the Atlanta Falcons, to me, especially, by the way, if they were to move on from Pitts, you got a big arm quarterback who likes to throw downfield, really like, Mooney and London, but they could use another receiver and another deep threat. And I actually think from a football perspective, that would make sense as well.
One other team I'll throw in there, which is if we're one player away and we're on a rookie contract, what about the Commanders? We're trying to close the gap on the Eagles. We added Deebo Samuel. We have Terry McLaurin. Why not add maybe the most explosive player in the NFL and take advantage of the fact that Jaden Daniels is still on a rookie deal?
Yeah, the Commanders weren't afraid to add this offseason, bringing in Deebo Samuel, Laramie Tunsil, so they're obviously in go-for-it mode. So that's three big names that could potentially be dealt now that June 1st has come and gone. Jeremy, take us through a couple more, starting with Jair Alexander.
Yeah, Jair Alexander, Dan, he's a situation where he and the Packers are still talking. They're trying to find some common ground on a potential reworked contract. They have not hit a sweet spot yet. Now, if they were to trade him or cut him, they could save $17 million on the cap, but there just hasn't been a lot of momentum to find a trade partner. I was told that Jair will honor his contract as it stands unless they can find out a new contract that makes sense for him. So right now they haven't done that, but I expect them to try to shake something out. They're particularly thin at corner without him. And then you have Bryce Huff of the Eagles. So this is a situation where I was told the 49ers were trying to make this work since March. They've had their eyes on Huff because of Robert Saleh coming in. He had success with him with the Jets. He can make him a full-time rusher, get the best out of him. The Eagles simply could not. And so a trade should go down here really any day. They'll probably spit the money. It sounds like San Fran will cover about $8 million of his hefty contract. Then you got the Titans of Will Levis. We hit on him earlier. So right now there's not a lot of trade traction. He's on a rookie deal, so they wouldn't save a ton of money if they traded him, but they could save a few $1 million on their cap. But right now he's probably going to be QB2. Not a lot has changed. I think if there's a market that heightens for him, that they would look into it. But for now, there's not a lot of momentum. So it should be Cam Ward 1, Will Levis 2.
We start with some breaking news out of Detroit, where All-Pro center Frank Ragnow announced his retirement today. 29-year-old Ragnow released a statement saying, in part, "I've tried to convince myself that I'm feeling good, but I'm not, and it's time to prioritize my health and my family's future. I have given this team everything I have, and I